friends, welcome to this week's Kids Church at Home. This week we're going to be talking about whining. You never whine, do you? Well, maybe you'll be surprised to learn that there are people in the Bible who whined, and they got their way when they whined. But that didn't always work out for them. So we'll explore that a little bit more together. But before we do, our special shout out this week goes to Abigail and to Alexander. Hope that you guys are having a really good end of school year. So, whining. People in the Bible whined? Well, let me share this story with you that comes from 1 Samuel. So it's from the Old Testament, which means it's extra old. It's older than Jesus' time. And back in the time that the book of Samuel was being written, the community that the story takes place in was led by judges. They didn't have prime ministers or princes or kings or presidents. They had judges who would weigh decisions and make decisions for the people. So where does whining come in? Well, you know what whining is all about, right? I mean, I think we're all guilty of whining sometimes. When you really want something, when you ask for it, and then you're told no. And so immediately you start whining. Why not? Well, that is what this group of people does. So the Bible tells us the story of the judge and prophet Samuel, and how Samuel was a great leader. Samuel made all his decisions by talking to and praying with God. So people would come to Samuel with their big problems, and Samuel would pray and listen carefully to God and then come up and offer a solution. But Samuel was getting old, and the elders and the leaders, they were worried about the future, and they thought, we need to replace Samuel. We need to have some young blood in here. And you know, other countries, they have like these kings and emperors, and they're really powerful people. Maybe what we need is a powerful leader instead of a leader who relies on God for advice and for problem solving. Well, I imagine that Samuel's feelings might have been hurt. I mean, how would you feel if you were Samuel and you were told that you just weren't enough anymore? People wanted something different. I imagine you might have been unhappy, but Samuel prayed to God about it, because that's what Samuel did. And Samuel felt God saying, Samuel, right now I am their ruler through you, and I am just and I am fair. And Samuel, we know that kings sometimes are not fair. They're so wrapped up in power and trying to always rule and be right. You have to warn the people about this, Samuel. But at the end of the day, the people have to make their own decision. So Samuel went back to the people. He set his own feelings aside, and he went back and he warned the people about the power of kings and the dangers of kings, but the people were convinced they wanted to be like others. And so Samuel helped anoint Saul to be the next king of that people. They whined and they whined and they got their way, and Samuel did as the people wanted. And God accepted that decision. So Saul then became the new ruler of these people. And the people celebrated, they got their way, they were so excited. But as time went on, it didn't work out the way they had wanted. Saul was not that great of a king. Saul wanted power for himself. And Saul made a lot of mistakes. I wonder, have you ever wanted something and whined for something and finally gotten your way only to discover it wasn't really everything you had hoped it would be? That's what the people in Samuel's time discovered. That when they turned away from problem solving with God and using God as their direction for solutions and decisions, things went sideways. But it's hard, isn't it, to know what's best for us? How do you know what is best? How do the adults around you know what is best? Who can help us to make those big decisions and help us to work through those problems? Sometimes we're so convinced we know what the right solution is that it doesn't matter what somebody with more experience is saying. We're convinced we know, only to discover maybe down the road that we didn't know as much as we thought we did. Now here's the thing though, not all was lost. Down the road, Saul wasn't a great king, but not all was lost. God was still there with the people. God still helped the people through. God continues to be there even when we whine and get our way and make the wrong decision. God is still there. But there is an invitation. There's an invitation for us to try and do better the next time. I wonder, what are some strategies that would help you to think of other people instead of what you want? I wonder what would help you to work with others to make decisions and problem solve instead of always thinking that you have the right answer. I wonder what might help us sometimes get out of ourselves and hear other people's experience differently. I wonder how the story would have turned out differently if Samuel and God had insisted people can't have a king. They had to stay with Samuel and God. So as I was thinking about an activity to do today, I was struck by how Samuel spent so much time praying for others, but we don't hear much about Samuel praying for himself. And I think sometimes when we get into spending time with God, the temptation is to pray for ourselves, right? It might be to pray for our own health or pray for something that we want. But what if we spent more time praying for others? Would the act of thinking about others maybe help us to open our eyes and our ears to the experience of others? And maybe that would move us out of this place where we want everything to be our way, and we might be able to see how things can go other people's ways too. So for our activity today, I want us to create a prayer pail. And you can do this in any number of ways. So I'm going to show you how I'm doing it. But I want you to think about what kind of materials you might want to use and how you might make your prayer pail your own. But here's what a prayer pail is, and then we can decide how to make each of our prayer pails our own. A prayer pail is going to be a container, and inside the container we can put all kinds of different people, different things outside of ourselves that we want to pray for. Because sometimes when we take time to pray, maybe we have a hard time coming up with who we need to pray for right now. Who could we pray for? What could we pray for? So our prayer pail is going to be a collection of all kinds of different ideas. And as you hear of things happening in other people's lives around you, you can add their name into your prayer pail so that when you sit down to have some time with God, you can just reach into your prayer pail and there are the ideas to remember, to think about others. So our prayer pail really is a reminder to think about and pay attention to others around us. So here are the items that I'm going to use to make my prayer pail. And then I'll show you some alternatives, but I want you to come up with how you might make your own prayer pail. Let's look at some options that you might be able to find around your house. What I'm going to use for my pail part is a small jar, and I will decorate it, and then I can put things, my prayer items, inside the jar. But there's other options. Maybe you have a little basket, or maybe you have a little cardboard box that you could use and decorate it. Or maybe you have a plastic cup. Any one of those things would work. Something that you can put things into. They won't get too crowded, but they'll be kept special and safe. Now, to add our prayers into our pail, we want something that we can put words onto. So again, I'm going to use popsicle sticks. I have lots of these, and so it's nice and easy, and I can add a name or a word onto the stick and put that into my jar. But there's other options. You might consider doing rocks. Wouldn't that be neat to have painted rocks with names on them in a basket? That's one option. You might also want to use colored slips of paper and just have paper beside your pail that you can add names and items as they come to mind, and then you can put them in the jar. Maybe even you could write words on ribbons and put colored ribbons in your pail. I'd be curious to see what are the items that you come up with to make your prayer pail your own special container of prayers. So off you go into the house, find items that you think you can make your prayer pail out of. 1, you need a container, and 2, you need something you can write words onto. So as I said, I'm going to use popsicle sticks for my prayers, and I'm going to use a mason jar as my pail. Now that I have the items I want, it's time for me to think about the prayers I want to add. So onto my popsicle sticks, I'm going to add names and people and situations that are outside of me that I want to pray for. So some of the first people I might want to add to my prayer pail are members of my family. So let's start with a few of those. Look at that. That was an easy start. So we're going to add Eli, and we're going to add Alex, and we're going to add Maudlin. We're going to add my siblings, so my brother and sister-in-law. We're going to add my parents. And it looks like I'm going to need some more sticks because I already have so many done. Next on my list, maybe I'm going to think about situations around me where there might be people who need some prayer. So let me think of maybe people at church. And I'm thinking about people who might be coming to camp this summer. So I'm going to add camp. Maybe there's some friends that you know of that need some prayers that are having a hard time. I'm going to add the word friends. But if you have a specific friend you know is having a hard time, maybe you could add their name to the prayer. So here are some situations that are close to me that I am going to add. Maybe you might include your school or your classroom or a friend circle or people in your neighborhood. Think about people that are close to you. Now I'm going to go even wider. So I started really close with close family, and then I thought about situations and people who are near to me, and now I'm going to think even wider to the world. So as I think about things that are happening in the world around me that I've been hearing about, well, there's still COVID, so I'm going to add all people who are affected by COVID. And it's Pride Month, so I'm going to add the LGBTQ2 plus community and my prayers for people and allies. And I'm going to add prayers for healthcare workers who are still so stretched with all that's going on. And I'm going to add kids who have been at home for a long time, because it's really hard to be home and away from our friends so long. And there's been some stories lately about the tragedies of residential schools, so I'm going to add my Indigenous brothers and sisters to my prayer pail. But I wonder, when you think about what's going on in the world around you, who or what might you add to your prayer pail? So this is my start. That's a pretty good start. There's lots of prayers in there. But you know what is really great about our prayer pail is that this is an open invitation to always consider adding new people and new things that we hear about around us into the prayer pail. As we continue to open our minds and our eyes and our ears to things that are happening to other people around us, it helps to pull ourselves out of our own selves, out of the focus that we might have on everything that we want and everything that's going on for us. And when we pull ourselves out of our focus on ourselves, our eyes and our hearts become more open to other people and to God in other people. You are a beloved child of God, but so are everybody else around you. And so our invitation is to see that beauty and that love and that spirit alive in all those around us, and to lift them up with us, with our prayers. So put your prayer pail somewhere where you can add new items, new people, new situations all the time. And always remember to take that time then and maybe go through them every once in a while, remembering how important and beloved all of these people are to God as well. Now, I think this needs to look a little bit fancier. Just a minute. Well, that's a little bit better. We've got now a ribbon and a prayer pail, and I've made it my own, and it's decorated and it's special. And I can now keep it somewhere special to remember you and all of those around me who are special to me and who can use prayers and can use God's presence with them. And in that vein, let us do our blessing, but I want you to think about one of the people you put in your prayer pail this time. Imagine them in your head and imagine that you are saying this blessing to that person. May there be love in your heart to give. May there be joy in your heart to share. And may there be strength in your heart to lift others up. See ya.